Ever feel staying alone lonely? Fed up with everything around you? Feeling bored and don't know what to do in these endless summer days with cicada chirping on the background? Well, I have one solution for you. It's Haruki Murakami's work. I know I've been delayed in sharing my book lists with you guys as promised, and I'm happy that today I finally share my book lists of Murakami with you guys. So please let me know in the comment if you like any of the works or you're interested in any of the works that I mentioned today. Okay, let's get started. Murakami is a popular contemporary Japanese writer, and his exposure to Western cultures distinguishes him with other Japanese writers. Signals such as classic music, characters alienated from the whole society, supernatural tones, black humor, often showing his works. Personally, for me, Murakami's work bugs me out of loneliness and imprinted me with so many of stories that related to his work. I first got into know his work is in year 2015 when I first joined my workplace. At that time, I just bought a random essay collection of his. I would read one article after lunch at that time every day. Usually it's like a review of a certain article or his taste about some music pieces. And it's healthy not only to your mental health but also to your body shape. After all, I'm standing there reading the book. What really intrigues me to further read his work is that I was very much impressed with his attitudes of doing chords. He would simply turn something like ironing the clothes into an art for work. So, reading his work becomes unstoppable for me. So his first ever fiction I read is Norwegian Wood. It is told in the first person's perspective of Toru Watanabe, looking back his old days as a college student. Through his romances, readers see him develop relationships with two totally different women. One is beautiful yet emotionally disturbed, Naoko, and the other outgoing, lively, Midori. I read this fiction in a post-relationship trauma, and at that time I really want to find a solution in that book. Though it's impossible, but somehow it functions as a valve that unleashed my emotions. I think there is something similar within everybody with that work. That is the intuition of one person that always wanted to face the sunlight and find a solution to his problems. So if you are in a relationship trauma, probably that's a book for you. So the second novel that I embarked on is called The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. The story tells that in a suburban Japanese flat, not a work person, Toru folds his laundry and contemplates the disappearance of his first cat and wife, who hasn't been home for days. During the process of looking for his wife and missing cat, he encounters with a bizarre group of people. Some of them are allies, some of them adversaries. Each of them teaches something new about himself. For example, he met this girl and found this delicate feeling depicted in this novel that really touches readers' heart. One thing leads another, that he ends up finding the inky darkness of a well, which later he uses to crawl into and think. Excuse me that I cannot unveil more of the details, otherwise you might lose the interest in finding out yourself. And I resonated a lot with this novel because there's one plot that Toru has nothing to do and he wanders across the street and just sit there watching strangers. During that period, I was that kind of lonely as well. And ever after, I found that whenever I'm sitting on the chair watching people, and I found someone is similar to me. The other is I visited Japan some time ago, and when I wander across in the neighborhood in Tokyo, I had a reminiscence that one of the deserted house in front of me really resembles the house depicted in Murakami's work. Imagine I have no relatives in Tokyo, and that really offers like hospitality in Tokyo for me. So the third fiction that I read is Kafka on the Shore. Kafka on the Shore is structured around the alternating stories between a 15-year-old boy. He runs away from home to escape the Oedipal prophecy, and Nakata, an aging and illiterate man who has never recovered himself from a afflicted wartime. And one of the characters, Kafka, found his shelter in a private library in Takamasu, and he met a welcoming librarian, Oshima, who later on led him into a forest, and he found a place to heal himself. Nakata, on the other hand, set forth for a quest for an enigmatic entrance stone. The story is intertwined with imaginations that Murakami never fails the audience. Say, fish flying from the sky, a cat that can talk. One interesting story happened to me is that when I traveled in Germany some years ago, my German friend just took me to a mountain area where the scenery is just picturesque and so serene, and I said that really reminds me of the novel Kafka on the Shore. Coincidentally, he read the novel as well, and all of a sudden he asked me, what if you have an entrance stone? What would you change? And that really hit me. I still couldn't know what I would change if I had an entrance stone. What about you guys? So you need to really read that novel and find out the answer yourself. Oh, another interesting story I had with Kafka on the Shore is that when I stopped by Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands, I bought a bag that said Kafka on the Shore. The shop assistant at first looked very cool, and later on when checking out, she asked, have you read the novel? I said yes. She said, I love it a lot. And at that time, people really click with each other. The conversation just opens up with the possibility because you guys read the same novel and liked it. The last by two work I read about Murakami's is called Calling the Commendator. The protagonist is a unnamed portrait painter whose wife leaves him at the beginning of this book. Devastated, he goes on a road trip, setting out for nowhere. One thing led to another. He ends up living in a house owned by a renowned painter who paints the painting Calling the Commendator. And he picks up painting portrait after he met a wealthy neighbor of his who offers a large sum of money to him. As the relationship evolves, this wealthy neighbor reveals that he has a private daughter. Probably the protagonist could arrange a meetup for him in the pretense of painting a portrait for the little girl Marie. But the girl went missing mystically. The protagonist then finds ways to reenact the painting, Calling the Commendator. The little girl was rescued in the end, and the protagonist reconciles with his wife. For the very first time, this is a happy ending in Murakami's work because, as you know, he is very famous in creating the thoroughness of an alienated character in society, which probably ends up staying alone. I had a really deep affection with this book, mainly because at the start of the pandemic in 2019, I spent my days reading this novel because, you know, at that time it's really a panic and I could think of nothing that could comfort me than staying alone to read Murakami's work. And I indulged in his work. At the end of the day, it only left like very few pages of the work. I devoured it with a cherish. It lit up my days at that time, and when out of the pandemic and people were curious how I spent so many days alone, I said I had his work, and I really hope this work would accompany you out of the darkness and out of the misery as well. The last one that I read about Murakami, but not the last one because literally I'm thinking about continuing reading his work, but the recent last one I read is what I talk about when I talk about running. At first, I thought it's only a memoir about running. I wasn't particularly a great fan about running, so I missed his work. But whenever I had it, it never left my hand, and I finished it within one breath. And that means that one breath lasts for 2 weeks. It mainly is a memoir about how Murakami embarks on being a novelist, and at the meantime, he picks up running. And in his work, he draws so much parallel between running and being a novelist. It really is something that I could learn from because I am an influencer now. His thought really resonates with me because at first, he was not a very famous writer. He said, as long as my work can be read by one audience and he benefited from his work, he thinks that's meaningful already for him. That applies to me as well. Although my work now, sometimes they don't seem popular, I feel only one or two resonated and get to understand meaning behind this video is already sufficient to support me to go forward. So his work really inspires me, and I have so many notes, so many of my thoughts, and this is a book that I would read and reread because it's not only about memoir, it's also about an inspiration towards someone who is determined to succeed and excel at his work and his passion. So thank you so much today for walking through this video with me, and please let me know which novel or which work is the most interesting to you. Just comment below. Thank you so much. Bye bye.